I have just been sent yet another leaked scene from Game of Thrones' up-and-coming prequel series entitled House of the Dragon. In this video, I will explain what exactly may go down in that scene and what's its book relevance. Now, as always, this video may contain spoilers, so here's your sign. Now, real quick, before we get started, please slap a like on this video, as the like goal is going to be 420. Also, make sure you're subscribed, and then, this is the most important part, make sure you turn your notifications on, so that way you get alerted every single time I drop a video. Long night! Now, if you're watching this video and haven't yet seen my House of the Dragon breakdown series, well, go ahead and click right here, and that'll take you straight to that video. I do plan on releasing part 2 by this Sunday, and if you want, you can watch that video before you watch this one. Now, at this point, I'm sure most of you are aware, but this information is to be taken with a grain of salt because it's more than likely horseshit. Now, according to my source, this leaked scene is from House of the Dragon, and it is actually in the 3rd episode of, obviously, the 1st season. They mention that it involves a large chunk of the season 1 budget. As a matter of fact, they go on to detail that more than 45% of the 1st season's budget was spent on this one scene. I don't know how much I believe that, but they also mention that it will involve at least 4 or more dragons and upwards of 2,000 live-action extras. They go on to detail that the pyrotechnics in this scene is supposedly greater than that of Loot Train from the original Game of Thrones series. Now, just sort of pausing for a second, if the rumors online are to be believed, then this House of the Dragon successor series is going to be taking place during one of the Targaryen civil war known as the Dance of Dragons. And if that's the case, then there's really only 1 or 2 battles that this scene could be talking about. The problem is that they're saying it's happening so early on in the series, I don't know if it's to be believed. The first thing that obviously pops into my head when, I first read about this supposedly leaked scene was the most epic battle in all of A Song of Ice and Fire history, or at least that's kind of how it's been written. That is the great dragon battle between Aemon Targaryen and Daemon the Dragon Knight Targaryen. Now, as of yet, I haven't quite gotten to the point of talking about Daemon Targaryen in my Fire and Blood video series, so I'll just go ahead and break down his character a little bit. Now, Daemon Targaryen is actually the uncle of Rhaenyra Targaryen, and she's sort of probably going to be one of the main characters of this spin-off series. And this guy Daemon who's her uncle, eventually becomes her husband. But Daemon was known to ride on the majestic dragon Caraxes and fought in the War of the Stepstones. He ended up, one of the things that he's most noted for is from turning a group of unruly thugs in street hood into a well-trained army and fighting militia. They were well-funded. They were known as the City Watch, in which Daemon was actually a commander of. Now, what's interesting, because during the time period of the Dance of Dragons, Daemon was considered by many to be the most dangerous man in Westeros. Most of the time, whenever he made a threat, it wasn't idle. For instance, when Aegon the Usurper had his wife's son killed, then Daemon actually sent Blood and Cheese, who were 2 former members of the City Watch. Remember, they started out as thugs. Daemon ends up sending Blood and Cheese, who are 2 former thugs in his City Watch. He sends them to go and kill one of Aegon II's sons. It's a super sick scene, and I'll go into detail in it in my next Fire and Blood video, but to carry on, after Daemon sent Blood and Cheese to go do this, he ended up his nephew, Prince Aemon, to a confrontation at Harrenhal. And this leads me all back to that leaked plot scene. This is what I think they may be talking about, but just to sort of summarize this battle, it happens at the God's Eye. And after Aemon insults Daemon, well, Daemon ends up climbing up on his dragon, but the key thing is that he does not fasten his chains that connected him to the dragon. Now, this is where the shit gets crazy. Caraxes, the dragon that Daemon was flying on, is actually a little bit younger than Aemon's dragon Vhagar, and that meant one thing, that Daemon was easily concealed in the clouds. So as he flies up, and while Aemon on the back of his dragon Vhagar is looking out for him, trying to find Caraxes and Daemon, guess what? Boom! Daemon pops up out of nowhere and literally leaps off of his dragon while Caraxes attacks Vhagar and rips open her stomach or some shit. Remember, he did not button himself up on those chains, but he basically pulls out Dark Sister, which is a very famous House Targaryen sword, and rams it through the only good eye of Aemon Targaryen. They both fall into the God's Eye, and that's the last we hear of him. Now, if we jump back to that leak, it did say that there were supposedly 4 dragons involved in this. Now, my whole thing is that Game of Thrones, when it comes to storyline, past season 1, doesn't exactly follow a play-by-play of the book. What they do is they mix and match certain characters, give them either different names, or give one character who has a small part a large arc taken away from another character. Game of Thrones has done this mainly because they want to keep us on the top of their toes. They want to make it so everyone who's read every single page of the book will still have to somewhat guess at what's coming next. Like, we may know the majority of what happens, but we may not know necessarily what actually happened or what order it happened in. Now, what that could all mean is that maybe Game of Thrones has decided to make this an earlier on event just to show us how badass Daemon is, and maybe he doesn't actually die, and instead of just there being 2 dragons, maybe it's a 4x4 dragon melee. We don't really know at this point, but with this leak saying, or with this source rather saying, that 45% of the first season's budget is blown in this episode, then something major has to happen if this information is to believe. One thing that it could be, instead of 4 dragons, it could actually only be 2, just for the fact that they're so massive, they need double the amount of operators, or dragon crew members, I should say, on set when they're filming this scene. Now, just to sort of reiterate real quick before wrapping this video up, we do have to realize that the cast for this show hasn't even been announced yet. We do know that it has been under development for 3 years almost, but we still don't know who the main characters are going to be. So all this information that I've been getting is likely a load of horse crap, but it does one thing, and that's keep us entertained. With that being said, I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could, please slap a like on this video. The like goal is going to be 1,420. Also, make sure you're subscribed, and then this is the most important part. Make sure you have your notifications turned on so that way you get alerted every single time I drop a video. Long night. Super special shout out to every single person watching this video, and a super special thank you to every single member of my Patreon family over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews. I want to thank you all again so much for watching. My name is Mark, and this has been Sir Hunts Reviews.